President Donald Trump, as we speak right now, is giving a speech in Saudi Arabia right now on his first foreign policy trip in his second term. And he chose to go to the Middle East, and he's going to Saudi Arabia right now. He's also going to go to I think it's the UAE, and I actually forget the third place he's going to go right off the top of my head. But one place that's not on the list is Israel. And that by itself raised a lot of eyebrows when the trip was announced, because in conjunction with some of the other things that Trump has been saying and doing of late, there appears to be some daylight coming in between Trump and Netanyahu personally and the U.S. and Israel generally, to try and help us make sense of what the tea leaves are saying here and what some of these things may or may not mean. We have, for the first time on our show, Katie Halper, host of the Katie Halper Show on YouTube, co-host of Useful Idiots, and a documentary filmmaker. Katie, first of all, welcome to the show. We're delighted to have you on today.
Thanks so much for having me on. Really excited to be here.
You listen, for any of our folks who may not know you, and I know a lot of them do because I've already seen some of the comments in the on our show here that people are excited to have you on. But for those who may not know, I want to know a little bit about you. I understand you're a Jewish Voices for Peace member, I guess one of the first ones after October 7th. And I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about what that means and what kind of heat you may have taken as a Jew taking this position.
Yeah, sure. So I am a member of the really great organization, Jewish Voice for Peace. I really commend them on all the work that they've been doing. For people who don't know, they organized, for instance, they co-organized the protest at Grand Central Station, which people may have seen. It was very moving. Basically, they took over Grand Central Station and demanded a ceasefire. And they are an organization that really pushes back on the idea that all Jews are a monolith and all Jews support Israel. And that's something I really try to emphasize as well. You know, I think one of the ironies is that it's not just dangerous and incorrect to equate anti-Zionism or criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. I think it's actually ironically anti-Semitic in itself, because it presents the idea, or it suggests that all Jews are a monolith. We all support Israel. And, you know, it's ironic because a lot of anti-Semites will use the term Zionist and Jew interchangeably, like the Zionist this, the Zionist plot, the Jewish plot. And it's interesting that the other people who use those terms interchangeably or suggest that they're interchangeable terms are people like, I would say, the government of Israel or the Anti-Defamation League or AIPAC. So it really does lean into this dual loyalty trope as well. Now, that's not the primary reason that I'm not an Israel supporter. I just think that that's an ironic kind of layer in this story, that every time someone suggests that it's anti-Semitic to criticize Israel, they are actually engaging in anti-Semitism.
Yeah, and I wanted to go down that a little bit. There was a bunch of, actually most of the news here in the United States covered some renewed protests going on at Columbia University. There was a bunch of stuff going on in the library. It was getting around finals time or whatever, and they took a lot of heat. And several of the Western media, and I won't say which ones right now, just call this a pro-Hamas deal, and that all these leaders, all these people in there should have their visas revoked and they should be sent out of the country. Elise Stefanik was leading that charge. And never at any point did they say anything about what the people were protesting, who they were, what they were for, only that they just categorically were pro-Hamas. How do you see those kinds of things? And what do you do when you see those kind of characterizations?
I mean, I think it's just there's a lot of effort to distract from what Israel is doing right now. And what is happening right now is, I would say, a genocide. And you don't have to listen to me. I mean, I would say you can listen to the experts in international humanitarian law or human rights law. You can listen to, for those people who need to hear these voices, you know, you can listen to several Israeli Jewish Holocaust experts as well. Raz Siegel, Omar Baratov.
We've had Omar Bartov on the show telling us exactly that.
Right. So, and, you know, I actually, it's an interesting thing that I'm not sure if your viewers know this, but I was fired by the Hills Rising for saying that Israel was an apartheid state. So I defended Rashida Tlaib's very logical statement. It's not an opinion, it's fact. There's apartheid in Israel. And I I wrote a monologue about this. I made a video about it, and they refused to run it. And when I pushed back on it, they fired me. But just bringing that up in terms of media bias. But yeah, I mean, we made at the Katie Halper show a little mashup showing how ridiculous the distortion of reality has been by the media when it comes to these student protests. I mean, all of the violence that we've seen, and this in a way is a microcosm of the media bias when it comes to Palestine generally. So all of the violence that we've seen at these protests, at these encampments, has been committed by the pro-Israel side against the pro-Palestine side. Yet the media either talks about it as if it's both sides, or they actually usually talk about it as if it's just Israel supporters who are at the receiving end of violence, just Palestine supporters who are perpetuating it. Now, again, the people who have spat on people, the people who have beaten people with wooden planks, the people who have done have kicked people, the people who have set off fireworks, the people who have used the N-word, the people who impersonated a monkey in response to a woman who's Black. Those were all pro-Israel people. And you have Dana Bash. I know you said you won't name the media people. I'll name them then. But Dana Bash, and that partly because I do this every Monday. Actually, Aaron Mate and I on Useful Idiots, we have a show called a stream called Monday Morning, spelled MOURNING, where we react to the Sunday morning news shows we watch so that you don't have to. But so we get to know these characters very well, and Dana Bash actually compared to these protests to 1930s Europe. I mean, suggesting that we're seeing kind of Nazi level hate. And the only hate that we're seeing, I would say, the majority of the hate is the hatred and dehumanization of Palestinians. And this is the domestic front of that war, that genocide. There's no genocide here. I mean, there was historically, but not now. I want to try to be careful. I'm not equating those two things. What we're seeing in Gaza is a genocide, but this is the domestic front of that same battle. And so when your government, in our case, our government, is supporting a genocide, they can't really tolerate any protests of that genocide. So they have to make the people protesting that genocide look like anti-Semites, or look like terrorists or terrorist supporters, because the truth is what they are is they're people who don't want to see children, women and men. That's a whole other issue, this idea that if they're men, they don't count or something, but they don't want to see women and children are especially bear the brunt, especially, and seeing images of children's bodies in bags. This is what the people at these schools who are protesting are fighting against, not against Jews. And again, if anyone needs evidence of this, I mean, look at the big Jewish population, the big Jewish presence at all of these encampments. And they had Shabbat dinners at Columbia University. I've had the students, the kids from Columbia on my show, and they're great. They're great people. They care about suffering. And they are, some of them are Palestinian, some of them are Jewish. I had a really fascinating student. His name is Aharon. He actually, listen to this, he's from California. He and his family moved to the West Bank. They were settlers. He realized that what Israel was doing was indefensible. He went to jail. He's now at Columbia, and he's a good friend of Mohsen Madawi, the second Palestinian student at Columbia who they tried to deport. He's been freed. Mahmoud Khalil has not, but he came on my show and he, defended Mohsen, and it was just a fascinating trajectory to hear about this young man's trajectory. So,
is it? I don't. Possible might be the right word. Actually, different question. So one of the other things that has been in the news on that report I just mentioned that I saw a second ago, a few days back, the comment was how scared some of the Jewish students are and how afraid they are to be able to go to class or whatever. But I'm sure that there's probably some truth to that. They may be afraid of it. But I wonder, the Jewish people you're talking about, the Jewish students also at that university, do they feel threatened by what the government is doing and what the police force is doing against them?
Yeah, I mean, that's the irony. People, again, and this goes back to the danger of conflating all Jews with Israel supporters and presenting this monolith of Jews, right? As if we're this one group and we don't have any differing opinions. I think that when they talk about Jewish student safety, I'm always like, well, maybe, yeah, there are some concerns because some Jewish students have been thrown to the ground by police. Some Jewish students have been pepper sprayed or sprayed with some chemical, as is the case in Colombia. Now, again, I don't care about Jewish students more than I care about non-Jewish students, but it's worth noting because for those people who constantly talk about the Jewish students, Jews as this monolith, I think it's important to say, yeah, there are safety issues when it comes to Jewish students, but it's not the Israel supporter students. There's been no violence towards them. There's only been violence towards the Palestine supporting Jews and the Palestine supporting students in general. And I've had people on the show who were thrown to the ground, who they've been evicted from their housing. They've been expelled by Colombia. And there's footage of her, this young woman, literally thrown to the ground. And then by police officer. There were all these lies that were spread about who was there. They it was so embarrassing. They presented this chain. They showed the media a chain. Someone from the NYPD dropped a chain dramatically during a press conference to show the kinds of weapons that these kids allegedly had. This chain is a chain that people use for their bicycles. Just like an example of how irresponsible they are. They talk about outside agitators. I mean, there's a real playbook, though. They did this with Martin Luther King also, right? Martin Luther King was funded by the Communist Party. He was working for the Russians. I mean, it's the same thing. Whenever they don't like what you're doing, they say it's outside agitators. And I've been so moved, honestly. When I went to the Columbia's campus, I saw Jewish students who had chained themselves, speaking of chains, chained themselves to the gates and to protest the treatment of Mahmoud Khalil. I saw a Palestinian student who was there. So they were in solidarity with Mahmoud Khalil. Then there was a Palestinian American student there in solidarity with them. It was really, that's the type of thing that gives me hope, is seeing young people stand up, say, young Jews say not in our name, and young people of all backgrounds. And of course, seeing Palestinian American students whose people are being wiped out, literally. I mean, they are being exterminated. There's no doubt in my mind that Israel is engaging in genocide. But seeing these students have to fight for their kind of dignity and humanity here, and also knowing that they, in many cases, have family members who are either, whether they're in Gaza and being killed, or in the West Bank and being killed, which is another issue, which is, this myth that it's all about Hamas. If that were true, they wouldn't be killing people in the West Bank.
Yeah. And look, before we shift on to the primary target here of today's episode, I want to ask one more question, because I think it's really important. There has been a number of, in Israel, I'm talking about a number of, and quite a few protests against the Netanyahu government. Obviously, these are Israeli people that carry the Israeli flag, etc. That's almost never covered here. And I wonder if you could explain a little bit from a Jewish perspective for Jews who love Israel but do not like the government and these policies.
Sure. So I should be honest that I'm not a Jew who loves Israel but doesn't like these policies. But there are Jews who love Israel and don't like these policies. So in fact, a lot of the protesters that we see are protesters who are angry at Netanyahu, rightfully so. I mean, Netanyahu could not care less about the hostages. I mean, that's not even hyperbole. There's so many things they could have done if they actually cared about the hostages. And we know from Israeli media and Israeli people that there was a mass Hannibal, as they called it. So the Hannibal directive was engaged in. And that, for people who don't know, and you know much more about this than I do, that is when you kill your own soldiers in order to prevent them becoming hostages, because that way you don't have to negotiate. But there are people who are mad at Netanyahu. There are a couple levels. There are the people who, sadly, I would say, the majority of people in Israel think that there's the force that's being used by Israel is either not enough or is the right amount. There's a very small population that thinks it's too much, which is a very sad thing. But I mean, that's a whole other discussion why there's so much consensus in Israel. So, but there are two levels of people who are protesting, I would say. three. There are some people who are actually very small group of people see Palestinians as human beings with human rights and don't want them to be killed. Then you have people who are mad at Netanyahu because he's not negotiating to free the hostages, because he didn't protect people on October 7th, because the soldiers who should have been keeping that people there safe were basically defending violent settlers at the West Bank. So you have those types of people. And then you have people who I think, are generally critical of Netanyahu's politics, but not particularly because of his treatment of Palestinians. But I would definitely say you don't have to be. What I would say is I'm someone who's I'm not an Israel supporter in any way, but I would say there are plenty of Israel supporters in Israel and here who are critical of Netanyahu. And I actually think like anyone who cares about Israel or Israelis should be horrified by what Netanyahu's doing.
Right. And I would probably fall into that category. As I've been saying from the beginning, from the very beginning that they went into Israel, into Gaza, that Netanyahu had put his country on a military path that can never succeed and is laying many, many seeds of future probably violence and chaos for his own country. He's not going to solve anything about this. Right. But the bottom line I guess I want to get here is that kind of reinforce something you said, is that there is no Jewish monolith. There are views all over this, is even you yourself experience some different levels of things. And so we need to stop just saying, no, the Jews think this, because then that doesn't exist. So I appreciate you bringing that up and making that very clear to the audience here. But now I want to get to the subject.
One other thing I would just want to say, sorry, if I may, it's, again, the irony is that people who care about anti-Semitism, I mean, what's more anti-Semitic than suggesting that all Jews support what is basically a live stream genocide? That doesn't make Jews safer. So it's ironic because sometimes Jews like me will get called anti-Semitic. And again, I don't speak out in order to protect Jews. That's not my primary function at all. I speak out because this is a human rights violation. This is a genocide. That's wrong. I also, I would speak out whether or not I was Jewish. I think it adds another layer when knowing that government and media is pretending that this is in our name and for our sake. So not only is that inaccurate, but that's certainly a dangerous message to send the world. Like, I don't, for my own safety, I don't want people thinking that this is being done for me.
Yeah, I totally get that. And thank you for clarifying that. In the topic that we want to talk today, there has been, and during the Joe Biden administration, especially since October 7th, there was, I won't say blanket support, but something close to it. But there was still a bit of a gap between, especially Biden and Netanyahu himself, but a pretty small gap. Well, then Trump came in, and at first it kind of looked like there wasn't any gap, and it looked like they were just hand in glove kind of situation. But of late, as this report from France 24 shows, something has changed.
The Trump administration appears to be sidelining Israel a little bit. And obviously, the recent ceasefire with the Houthis was a case in point. The Trump administration's decision to begin nuclear talks with the Iranians. And also, there is a possibility of the Trump administration lifting sanctions on Syria. These are all examples of the Trump administration sidelining Israel and not catering to the demands of Netanyahu.
Now that was just yesterday here, but as a frame of reference here, I want to show you a couple of clips here. This is Trump back on March 7th, who at that time made it look like he'd already made a decision to go to war with Iran on behalf of Netanyahu.
We're down to final strokes with Iran. That's going to be an interesting time. And we'll see what happens. But we're down to the final moments. We're at final moments. You can't let them have a nuclear weapon. It's an interesting time in the history of the world. But we have a situation with Iran that something's going to happen very soon. Very, very soon. You'll be talking about that pretty soon, I guess. And hopefully we can have a peace deal. I'm not speaking out of strength or weakness. I'm just saying I'd rather see a peace deal than the other. But the other will solve the problem.
Yeah, of course, I said at the time, no, the other won't solve the problem. But there has been a sea change between that. Shortly after, and I want your opinion as far as you know anyway, after Netanyahu came here, there seemed to be a change to where now all of a sudden Trump is saying, but you know what? Let's actually prioritize diplomacy over there will be bombs falling, et cetera, like he said before. Do you have any sense as to why there was a change?
I don't. I mean, and I would love to know your insights into that, because you're someone who's actually been much closer to, close at all. I haven't been close at all to Donald Trump. So I'm curious about what your insights would be. But I don't know what the changes. I mean, I've said from the beginning that I always thought that there was a slight chance that Trump would be better on Palestine. I mean, I thought there was a big chance that he would be just as bad as Biden, if not worse. But I always thought that there was a minor chance because he is not an ideologue the way that Biden is. Like, Biden would always talk about the fact that he's a Zionist, and Trump seems very influenced by maybe the last person he spoke to. I mean, he seems like he doesn't have as much of a platform, a policy platform, as other presidents do. Also, I think that there's a lot of, my sense is that he really wants the Nobel Peace Prize. I think that he is upset that Obama got it. I think he probably wants one. I think that there's a lot of like personal stuff at stake for Trump. Now, to be fair, Joe Biden also told Kamala Harris that there had to be no daylight between them in terms of policy. And that's probably one of the reasons she lost. So I don't want to suggest that Trump is kind of uniquely self-interested, but I do think that when you're less ideological, different things can come into play. And I think, if Trump ever watches the show, he should know that there's video of Netanyahu from I think it was the 90s, saying, I know what America is. America is a thing you can move very easily, move it in the right direction. They won't get in the way. And I think that maybe it's that kind of attitude, perhaps, that is getting Trump to maybe reconsider the relationship between Israel and the United States, because Netanyahu is a bully. He's a bully in the way that he treats Palestinians. I mean, that's an understatement, but he's a bully, and he's has no interest in saving the lives of either Palestinians or Jews. I think Trump probably wants to be able to say that he brought this to a close, that he brought a ceasefire. I think that he probably is seeing that Netanyahu is not interested in having a ceasefire. And Netanyahu is not interested in ending the war. I mean, Netanyahu, we know this from articles, his only, what he's insisting on is the full dismantlement of Hamas, even though Hamas has agreed to cede power. But that's not enough, because this really isn't about anything except for, I think, killing more Palestinians, taking more land, driving as many Palestinians out of the country as possible. And so I think that Trump is probably realizing that he and Netanyahu do not have overlapping goals.
Yeah. And to answer your question a second ago, I do have a theory, which I'm going to get to in just a second.
Okay,
but first of all, I want to get to look at that. So that's kind of on the Iranian issue there. The other big issue, of course, is Gaza. Now, back in February, Trump also, again, seemed to be right in line with Netanyahu when he said this.
I would like to see Jordan. I'd like to see Egypt take some look. The Gaza thing has not worked. It's never worked. And I feel very differently about Gaza than a lot of people. I think they should get a good, fresh, beautiful piece of land, and we get some people to put up the money to build it and make it nice and make it habitable and enjoyable. And I don't know how they could want to stay. It's a demolition site. It's a pure demolition site. If we could find the right piece of land or numerous pieces of land and build them some really nice places with plenty of money in the area, that's for sure, I think that would be a lot better than going back to Gaza, which has had just decades and decades of death.
So, that's about the time he was saying, let's just get them all out. Let's bring in my real estate kind of mogul stuff, and let's make it on the Riviera and all that video with, all the stuff that's going on there.
Right.
Now then, a week ago, he's now saying this.
When Gaza came up, and I said, we gotta be good to Gaza. Those people are suffering. We gotta be good to Gaza. We're going to take care of that. There's a very big need for medicine, food and medicine, and we're taking care of it.
in terms of like opening up more access points or
Very hard.
pushing the Israelis
We are
to open up more access
very
points?
hard to get food and medicine into Gaza.
How did the Prime Minister respond to that?
Well, felt well about it.
Yeah, he felt well about it. Yeah, I'm sure he did,
Yeah,
because
right.
that's right about the time that Netanyahu said, by the way, we're going to go back into Gaza. We're going to completely just destroy everything about Hamas, and we're staying there forever.
Right.
Trump goes, about Gaza.
Right.
So Netanyahu's got to be feeling a little not well.
Yeah, I mean, I think Trump is someone who's right used to people listening to him, right? Following his lead. I think also he probably knows that like Israel, this is all on America's dime, what Israel's doing, right? I mean, it's our weapons, it's our taxpayer money, it's our government's like legitimacy. They've been offering cover. I'm sure that Trump is probably the combination of Netanyahu acting like he's the boss, even though he's the one who's being funded by this government. I'm sure that combination is frustrating for Trump to encounter. This simultaneous, like, we're footing the bill, and also you're trying to boss us around.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, and there's a couple of other things here. So circling back to your question a second ago, there was a piece in the New York Times yesterday that was talking about the behind the scenes story of why we stopped attacking the Houthis, and why Trump announced last month that, okay, victory, we got the ceasefire off the table, we're moving on. As it turns out, a military analysis said that, man, we are spending lots of money on these weapons. We're using lots of these high dollar anti-aircraft missiles, to shoot down all these drones. We've lost a total of 22 now, but 7 since March the 15th, when this went down, of these $30 million drones. And he's like, man, this is just too expensive. And some of the key things are these interceptor missiles. Now, when you have Netanyahu saying, we're going to go back invading, we're going to stay, and it's going to be a multi-month deal, as you just pointed out, that's all got to come from us, not just the money, but the weapons themselves and the ammunition and the bombs and everything else. And I think Trump's starting to go, hang on, this is not working out for me. This is not something I'm interested in doing, and just depleting my resources further. So I think that's number one. But number two probably is more about the cash, as Peter Doocy said this morning.
There is so much money at this conference center that is going in both directions. You've got Saudi companies that are investing in the U.S., American companies that are investing in Saudi Arabia. But the most important thing is just these Saudi government investments in the U.S. They are promising $600 billion in U.S. investment over the next couple years. This conference would be a good place to start explaining what exactly that is going to look like. And there's just a lot more to the U.S. and Saudi relationship now than just security guarantees and oil sales. The Crown Prince wants Saudi Arabia to be a major player on the world stage, and they are. So we expect the next couple days to look like this when it comes to investment in the U.S. Saudi Arabia's got the $600 billion pledged over the next 4 years. Qatar has $200 to $300 billion expected to be announced on this trip. Plus, you got the $400 million jumbo jet. And then when we get to the United Arab Emirates, they say $1.4 trillion pledged to the U.S. over the next 10 years.
Yeah. One of the things that Trump, that had been levied upon him at the first, was that, well, he had to do all this and just to kowtow to Netanyahu because he had gotten so much Israeli-backed money, and AIPAC and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah. But that pales to just pennies in comparison to this. And it looks to me like Trump is going, okay, yeah, I hear you, Israel, but I ain't going to risk all this money for what you want to do. And he's moving on to where the money is. That's what it looks like.
Yeah. And of course, they're offering him a palace in the sky airplane, which he would.
I'm sure that's not influential at all.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, whatever it takes to get Trump to depart from this unwavering support for Israel and enabling of genocide, I'm all for it. I mean, I would like it to be because he realizes that what Israel's doing is wrong. But if it has to be through this way, whatever it takes. And I think that, it is interesting that he is more, because he's less of an ideologue and so I think open to like flattery and gifts, we may actually see a better, more humane policy. I mean, it could. He also, it's like, to be clear, like people are starving and dying right now, and Trump isn't doing anything to stop that. But hopefully soon he will be doing something to stop that, and then he can brag that he took on Israel in a way that Biden was too afraid to do.
Yeah, there's always that political domestic benefit for him to try to get to, and I think that because of all these deals that Saudi Arabia is looking to do, I suspect strongly that behind the scenes they are saying, "Hey, we have some issues that we are too." Here from about 2 weeks ago is the Saudi foreign minister talking about Gaza.
Its continuing occupation and its annexation of parts of that territory are flagrant violations of international law that must be brought to an end as a matter of urgency. The court's ruling marked a clear path for Israel to follow in finally bringing itself into international legality. Sadly, but predictably, Israel chose to ignore the court's ruling, showing that it considered itself above the law.
And on top of that, you also have Israel, or you have Saudi Arabia saying that they would love to normalize relations with Israel. They want to do that, but an absolute prerequisite is that the Palestinian people have to have a path to a state of their own. They've said they're unequivocal on that. So I think if Trump is going to want to get a deal with them, he's going to have to say, all right, boys, you guys are going to have to change over here in Israel. So those things seem to be moving in directions that get to this possibly good policy that you're talking about.
Yeah. And of course, you know, the irony is that the Saudi government, or the crown prince, they don't care, I don't think, about Palestinians, but their people do. And they know that they will face some political cost if they, not that they have a democratic representative democracy or anything, but people in the streets, I think, will be a bit up in arms if they see Saudi Arabia normalizing relations with Israel without at least cosmetically, if not really substantively, pushing back on what Israel is doing right now. And of course, Saudi Arabia, I mean, another thing that the United States helps them with is their brutal war against the people of Yemen. But that's another issue. Related, obviously. I mean, that's a very related issue, though, because something that the media never tells you about is not you, obviously, but in general, people, they never mention why Ansar Allah in Yemen is doing what they're doing. And It's very clear they're doing that because they want Israel to stop the genocide. They are the only people really, on some level, standing up to the Israelis in a kind of material way.
Now, and much of at least American media has not covered that at all, and they've not mentioned that at all. We certainly do bring it up on our channel here, but you can say that there has been more interest and more willingness to look at this on the UK side than there has been the US side. But with this move by Trump, I think it's opening more space for more people to come into to cast a light on the things that actually matter from a humanitarian, from a human perspective, as this BBC report shows.
The UN has called for urgent international action to get aid into Gaza amidst fresh warnings that nearly 500,000 people there, 1 in 5 of the population, now faces catastrophic hunger. The Israeli government has allowed no food into Gaza for more than 2 months now. Fergal Keane reports a warning for you. His report does contain distressing images from the start.
Hunger visible as the Israeli blockade tightens its grip. The smaller you are, the harder the struggle. The hungry and the weak are everywhere. Islam Hajjaj and her 6-year-old daughter Najwa, malnourished, eyes that already know immense loss.
Who will help me with my daughter? I lost another girl during the war. I gave birth to her, and she only lived for 1 month with me. And because of malnutrition and the cold, my daughter passed away.
Gaza is no longer a place of the modern world, but the medics here struggle on. In the past year, we followed the experiences of American doctor Sam Attar, fighting to save lives, too often losing. This little boy died from a shrapnel wound in his skull.
And afterwards, we all found out, and we all just felt a little cold and detached from it, because it's stuff we're seeing all the time, and you save who you can, you mourn who you can, and then you move on. You have to.
That is the third time I've watched that video this morning, and it still chills me. And I cannot imagine, as just a basic human being, how anyone could see those kinds of images of that little girl and the hollow look on her face and not be torn and want to do something to fix it today. And
Right.
yet all too often, these kind of images go, okay, yeah, whatever, swipe right and move on to whatever's next.
Yeah, I mean, you even had speaking of the UK, and yeah, that is, I mean, that poor woman, to think that she already lost a daughter and she has to be pleading with the world to not let her daughter be killed by, this isn't like a natural disaster, right? This is a policy decision to not let in aid. So Israel, with the support of the West, is choosing to kill people through starvation. I think that's an important thing to remember. This is not some natural famine. Sorry, going back to the question, the issue of things shifting in England. I mean, you did have a conservative member of parliament say the other day, I've been supporting Israel. I've been an Israel supporter no matter what. And I was wrong. People I think are now, some people are really, it's just you can't look at that stuff. You can't buy the lie that this is to get rid of Hamas, the lie that this is to protect people from terrorists. Is so exposed by seeing children like that.
And by the way, let me throw in here, even because that's what Israel is saying. They say they've stopped this to pressure Hamas to get rid of to release the hostages. That is at face value an absolute violation of international law, the laws of warfare, to corporately punish an entire population to get something. That alone should exhibit
crime,
kind of action. Yeah, that's important to point out.
Right, collective punishment. I mean, they're acknowledging that. There's no. I mean, it is basically. I think that in the case of Israel, it's kind of like you can assume there are a couple things. One is you can assume that I think they're lying until proven not lying when it comes to the statements that come from Israel. I mean, all you have to do is go back to Shireen Abu Akleh, the journalist who was killed, and we now know from a new documentary who killed her. But Israel pretended that it was a Palestinian who killed her. They provided fake video. I mean, they go through major lengths to construct lies. So I think there's that. And I also think that, it's just the built-in war crimes that are built into the IDF. I heard Norman Finkelstein, he said this a couple of times. He talks about how if someone's in the IDF, that it's guilty until proven innocent, that they've killed civilians, as opposed to innocent until proven guilty.
This didn't. I mean, we've had examples of that, and provided by selfies and other videos of the soldiers themselves. Who you don't have to take anybody's word for it, other than their own. But what do you think that this movement by Trump, even if, as you said a second ago, it's motivated by financial gain for the United States? Do you think that this is opening up more space for more people to step in and say what's patently and plainly, obviously true?
Sorry, what about
what Israel's doing, and that it's now time to put pressure on the government of Israel to stop doing these heinous acts.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes undeniable. I think the longer the war, as they called it, which again I think was genocide, and they announced that when they said no water, no electricity, they're human animals and we'll treat them as such. I think that there was some fog of war at the beginning. It became very apparent very early on to anyone who had access to a phone that this was not, like you're saying, that this was not some kind of targeted response. You can't see those images and think that. And I do think that, maybe what what makes this period unique is that it's not that Israel has not done this before, although to be fair, I mean, to be honest, this is a level that they haven't done before, but they've been pales in response, but in comparison. But the thing that we have now is that they are live streaming it. And as you just mentioned, it's not just people, others catching it. It's the people doing it themselves. I mean, it's like sociopathic, the way they will wear women's lingerie, the sexual violence that they've inflicted on Palestinians, which is a whole other discussion. I mean, we have the media, Western media, totally parroting this debunked claim of Hamas using rape as a weapon, at a mass systemic level. That's been debunked. The media has never, the people here who push that narrative have never acknowledged that it's been debunked. They keep pushing it. And on the other hand, you have the documented rape and sexual violence committed against Palestinians that Israeli media has reported on. Israeli media reported on this. And you have people defending the right of rapists. You even had these things that people dubbed right to rape protests, because when they started to detain some of the, when they started to detain the soldiers who had been accused of rape, and it's been captured on video. I mean, it's like behind shields, but everyone knows what they're doing. And again, this is Israeli media. This isn't like Haaretz. This isn't left-wing Israeli media that's reporting on this. This is mainstream Israeli media. You have people who, when they started to attempted to detain the soldiers accused of this rape, there were protests. There were like riots in support of these soldiers. And that's why they were called right to rape protests. Then you had a member of the Knesset come out and say, because there was a big debate about whether or not these people should be punished at all. And you had a member of the Knesset saying that he was asked rhetorically if it was legitimate to insert sticks into people's rectums, because that's one of the things that happened. And he said, yes, everything's legitimate. And then you had a rabbi who blessed one of the soldiers accused of this rape. And one of them has become like a TV star. First, he would appear masked. Now, I don't think he even appears masked anymore.
Yeah, I was not aware of that part. That's news to me.
Exactly. And it shouldn't be that it should be new. This should be old news. I mean, this has been documented for months now, but the problem is the corporate media does not report on it in any way that reflects reality. I mean, again, the fact that you have to go to Israeli media to hear about this, and that's what's so infuriating. There are so many stories about this, and again, you can look at the reports by B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights organization. They called the prison system a network of torture sites. This is systemic. This is the systemic violence and torture and sexual violence that Hamas was accused of, that they did not engage in. I mean, there's really no evidence that there was any mass systemic rape of anyone committed by Hamas. There's one person who has accused Hamas of committing, of sexually assaulting her. I don't know if it was Hamas or someone else who was holding her as a hostage, but that was not on October 7th. Not that that matters, not that it makes it okay if it wasn't done on October 7th, but I bring that up because the lie is that this was done on October 7th, because of course that's been used as a justification. It's basically atrocity propaganda that we see time and time again. I mean, we saw this with Gaddafi, who was accused of providing his soldiers with Viagra so they could rape. Not true. We saw, Saddam Hussein was accused of ripping babies from incubators. Not true. This is the kind of the script.
Yeah, and it's been highly effective. That's why it continues to go on. In the last few minutes that we have here of our time, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about one of the other areas we don't hear almost anything about, and that is in the West Bank. Everybody's focused on the Gaza Strip for understandable reasons, but there's a lot of things going on also against the Palestinians in the West Bank. I wonder if you could talk about that for a second.
Well, yeah, I mean, bringing up Shireen Abu Akleh again, she was killed covering a raid in the West Bank. And what we're seeing in the West Bank is another front of this genocidal onslaught against Palestine. You have settlers there who are, fundamentalists who are basically would like to see a theocracy implemented. And there is, in some ways, it's already implemented. But they, people may have seen this very good documentary that won an Academy Award, No Other Land, and that covers this. And what was interesting is I actually have a relative who didn't think it was genocide before. And then when he saw No Other Land, which documents the destruction of Palestinian homes in the West Bank and the violence against Palestinians who were just trying to defend their homes, that really changed the way he saw this, because realizing that this was happening before October 7th, I mean, I think he knew about it intellectually, but sitting down and watching a film that showed us this, the whole but Hamas or October 7th excuse kind of flies out the window. So I think that that's also something that if people look at, it really gives away the game, that this is not about Hamas.
And what can be done now? So maybe we have this opening. Trump seems to be going in another direction. At some point, he's going to have to be faced with, do I keep on giving away all of my ammunition to let you keep doing whatever you want to do in the Gaza Strip? Or he may say, we're going to end that too. Because there was some reports that I saw yesterday that possibly as part of this trip, Trump's going to announce his plan to end the war in Gaza, which would totally turn upside down everything Netanyahu has, and many of the right-wing members of his cabinet. That would really throw things into a tailspin, but I don't care anything about that as long as it ends the killing. What do you think about where this can go?
Yeah, I mean, it would be amazing if Trump wanted to come out as like the first. Actually, you brought this up in our interview with Useful Idiots, but no president has really stood up to the Israelis. Maybe George Bush a little bit, and Reagan a little bit. Certainly more than anyone since. But I think if Trump wants to be remembered as a trailblazing president or as a unique president, what he definitely could do is stop Netanyahu from trying to not only exterminate the Palestinian people, but also stop Netanyahu from determining U.S. foreign policy. If you're an America First person, if you are an isolationist, which is, of course, what a lot of Trump's supporters say that they are, of course, you should be demanding that the United States not be dictated, not have its policy dictated by Israel. I mean, you don't want them supporting Israel anyway, but you certainly, I think, kind of on an ego level, don't want Netanyahu calling the shots. So again, that is my hope, that somehow we'll see an opening for change that we wouldn't see under other presidents.
Well, yeah, and I'm certainly very hopeful that we see that. We'll encourage that every step of the way we can. Before we let you go off today, I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about the Katie Halper show and where people can go to find that.
Great. Thanks so much. So I have a live stream every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's at youtube.com/The Katie Halper Show. I've had on great guests ranging from Ray McGovern to Glenn Greenwald. I'm trying to think of people Oliver Stone, trying to think of people who your audience will probably like. Tonight we have, a fascinating guest is Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro, who is an Orthodox Jewish rabbi who is very critical of Israel. We've had on Whitney Webb, Norman Finkelstein, Craig McIver, who is a great human rights lawyer, Lawrence Wilkerson, who of course worked for Colin Powell. Yeah. And tonight we're having on Palestinian analyst Mouin Rabbani, Iranian analyst Shrita Parsi, and the great journalist and historian Vijay Prashad. So you can tune in there. And I'm also working on a documentary, by the way, about Jewish Holocaust survivors who are speaking out against Israel's genocide, because Israel really does weaponize the Holocaust and use the Holocaust and weaponize anti-Semitism to justify what it's doing. And it's really important, I think, for people to see these people who survived the Holocaust saying, don't use what happened to us to justify what you're doing. I mean, these are people who call this a genocide. And these are people who really believe in never again. I mean, it's a very contested term nowadays, because for some people, never again really means what it should mean, which is that no genocide for anyone. And for other people, it's no genocide for this one group of people, and we'll do whatever required to keep Jews safe. But ironically, they're not even doing that. It's not even keeping Jews safe. I mean, I think Israel is probably one of the biggest threats to Jewish safety out there.
Yeah, I actually made a similar point on my show just this past weekend, where I talked about where I had been to Auschwitz, I've been to Dachau, and I've many times actually to Dachau, and I was very, very moved by that, and was so emphatic about the never again for anyone.
Exactly.
And so I'll be very fascinated to see that documentary. So do please let us know when that comes out. Yeah, and I can send you links to interviews that I've done with people that I've already released, because some of those survivors have been I've interviewed virtually. Yeah. Love to see that. Thank you very much. And thank you so much for coming on today, Katie. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
And thank you guys too. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't. And also to let you know, we're going to have Commodore Steve Jeremy on later this afternoon. Lots and lots of things going on with the Russia-Ukraine war. Tune in at 2 p.m. today, and we're going to have Steve Jeremy talk about, will Putin skip the Istanbul meet, or will this war continue going on? Tune in at 2 p.m. and we'll see you then on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.